Welcome to another episode of Same Page. As you know, we are your hosts, Sarah Semagist.
And Lénard Semagist.
Today we have an awesome guest with us, Carolynn Dubé. I'm saying it with a French accent. I don't know why. I guess
Perfect.
because of the accent,
Yeah.
or Carolynn Dubé. And we're gonna have an awesome conversation with her about fertility. This is the first time we're actually having a full out conversation together.
Mhm.
So we're gonna learn as much as our viewers live during this video. So thank you so much for accepting to be with us today. It's an honor to be able to have this conversation with you.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for the invitation. This is incredible.
Yeah, thank you. So before we get started and dive into your journey, can you just introduce yourself and yeah, tell us a little bit about who you are, and if you want to tell us a little bit about Fertility Matters as well. I don't know much about it too. You could do that.
I'd love to. So, my name is Carolynn Dubé. I'm the executive director at Fertility Matters Canada, and we're a national charity and the only organization in Canada that does the work that we do. So, we provide information, education, resources, and support for anybody who is struggling to build their family for whatever reason. If you need medical help or intervention to help you build that family, that's what we're here for. We also advocate on a national and a provincial scale for equal access to care. And we encourage all the stakeholders around the table, whether that's a provincial government, the federal government, employers, and people within the fertility sphere to help patients in Canada get access to this highly effective treatment for their medical conditions.
Okay,
All right.
awesome. And I know you live in New Brunswick.
Mm-hmm.
So is this organization in New Brunswick, or I know you said it's national.
Yeah,
But how
so
does that work?
that's a great question. So we are and have always been sort of a virtual network. We support patients in every province, and although my home is in New Brunswick, and the organization's physical address is in New Brunswick, we work virtually. So we support patients through our website, fertilitymatters.ca, and we're very active on social media. So you can find us on Facebook at Fertility Matters Canada or on Instagram at fertility_Canada. And we provide, for example, online support groups. So all of our support groups currently are Facebook based, according to the province that you live in. And then we have specialty groups. So we have a men's support group, for example, single women who are looking to build a family. LGBTQ, we're getting more support and access to information for members of the LGBTQ community who may need to use support. So that's where you can find us. So we are virtual, and that's how we connect with our patients.
Very nice. So, how did your fertility journeys begin?
Well, like many young couples, we'd gotten married, we were both working, and started to try to have a family, and things were not happening. And I just so happened, if I didn't know, and I hadn't had this connection with the former colleague, I wouldn't have really questioned it. I probably would have sat and we would have kept trying and trying and trying. But we got to the 3 or 4 or 5 month mark, and I said, something's not right. And we sought medical intervention right away. And it turns out that we have male factor infertility. And so that's something my husband and I are very open about. He's been very open about it. But as in our early 30s, it was a shock. And we knew nobody we thought we didn't know anybody that was struggling or had ever experienced this. So when the physician said, he literally said, you're never going to have a family. It was the biggest shock and blow to both of us. And I remember we both drove home. We had traveled to the appointment in separate cars, which was an hour and a half-ish from where we lived. And I just remember, I don't even know how I drove myself home from that appointment.
Yeah.
So it was not something that we had ever thought about. And so it was a challenge kind of right from the start. And it was really challenging for us to kind of process what that actually meant, because we actually knew nothing about infertility.
Mhm.
Now, could you dive a little deeper as far as like what is exactly male factor infertility?
Yeah, sure.
That's
So what's really interesting is that a lot of people assume when they hear the word infertility or fertility challenges or those types of things, they lots of times will assume the issues with the female. When in
Mhm.
fact, a third of the time, the diagnosis has to do with the female. A third of the time, it's a male issue, which is something to do likely with the sperm, or the ability for the sperm to get to the egg. And then another third of the time, it's unexplained. So doctors aren't really sure why you're unable to get pregnant or to maintain a pregnancy.
Mhm.
So that can be really challenging for patients too, when you're not really sure, you can't pinpoint what's actually the problem. So male factor, really low sperm count, and it just wasn't, we did genetic testing. There was nothing genetically wrong. It was just the physicians didn't know why this was happening, but we did know that it was a male issue. So the nice thing for us was that we could pinpoint it immediately, and we moved directly over into a referral to a fertility clinic to help us from there.
Okay.
Well, at least they were able to pinpoint it right away, because I know for us, like, it was very frustrating initially because they couldn't exactly pinpoint like what the causes were.
Right.
So at least in your case, they're able to pinpoint right away, and then give you the necessary help that you require.
Yeah. And you know how you can see if you've got this unexplained, or, sometimes when you know what it is, you can process it. It doesn't mean it's any easier,
Of course,
but it kind of helps you move through it a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you know, okay, this is what it is.
Yeah. It sort of helps like know, okay, well, this is what we need to focus on.
Yes.
Because a lot of times like, oh, it's my diet, it's my exercise.
Yeah.
We need this type of intervention or that type of intervention, and it's kind of like trial and error until and time passes, right?
Oh,
It's like months, from one intervention to another. It's
that's the thing.
weeks, it's months.
No.
So yeah.
And so many people don't realize how long. And by the time you actually get to an intervention, you've already been trying for a really long time.
Exactly.
And so month after month after month, it's like grief. The grief process happens, and the research shows that there is a grief process that does happen month after month when you're not getting pregnant and you're really struggling.
So you tried for 3-4 months. You went to the fertility clinic, or to the doctors.
Yeah, we got a referral from the family doctor to a urologist.
Okay.
And then I went to see my family doctor and had a couple of tests done. But my husband was in the military, the Canadian military at the time. And so things moved quickly for him. You don't wait for a doctor's appointment. He got in and he had his referral. And so we knew before I even really had anything done that there was an issue there.
Okay. So now you go to the doctors, you know what it is. At least you know which side it's on. So what happens next? So what type of treatment did you guys go through to arrive at your, the desired destination that you wanted?
So we had a referral to the clinic, and at that time we were living in Nova Scotia. So we went to the AART clinic in Halifax. It's a 3 or 4 month wait, I suppose, for that initial appointment. And prior to that, I think we'd done a few tests, some workup that they had ordered, more detailed semen analysis for my husband. And I had some different ultrasounds and those types of things. And so the nice thing was that, the doctors confirmed this is definitely male factor fertility issue. We can definitely do something about it. Excuse me. But the answer is IVF, and we have to do ICSI, which is where they take a single sperm and inject it into a single egg in order for this to work. So I knew nothing really about either of those things. I mean, at that point, I'd kind of Googled a little bit, tried to find some online support to figure out what the heck this was. But there's not there wasn't at that time, 7 or 8 years ago, a lot of information that I could find. that made me feel really empowered to have these conversations with my doctor, to ask the right questions. Sometimes you're sitting there and you're like, wow. And all we could think about, well, certainly all I could think about was, how are we going to afford this? Like, how do we just, we had a house, we had car payments, I had student debt, how does this work? And so once we got in, we had our initial appointment, all of those testing things were done. We were able to kind of figure out the financial side, and we started IVF quite quickly after that, actually. And moved to IVF with ICSI. And then I had experienced OHSS. So that's where you get your ovaries kind of overstimulate. Didn't realize it at the time, but was really sick. And I actually ended up doing a fresh transfer of a single embryo at that time, and it didn't work. We found out just before Christmas. It was December 18th. It was like the floor fell out from underneath me because we had done this transfer. I thought for sure I'm pregnant. I'm 32 or 31 or whatever I was at the time. Why wouldn't I be pregnant? I felt pregnant. And then they called, we have to do that dreaded 2-week wait.
Yeah.
And they said it didn't work. And I didn't prepare for that. And my husband hadn't prepared for it. So it wasn't something that was easy to kind of process or get over, because I thought, gosh, we just spent all this money.
Yeah.
And I have nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
Which was, man, so challenging. Totally devastating. Yes.
Did you only have one embryo from
No, we had, I had one that we transferred, and then I think we had 4, maybe 5 to freeze. 5 to freeze, I think. So we were very fortunate because I did have a good embryo count, which was really great, because that meant we could do subsequent cycles.
Exactly.
Right. Mm-hmm. So were you in Nova Scotia or New Brunswick at the time?
I was in Nova Scotia at the time.
Okay. And do they fund one IVF cycle? I know in Ontario they do.
No. So in Nova Scotia, there's no public funding for fertility treatments at all. There's no drug coverage under their, any pharmacare plan. And in fact, in Canada, there are 5 provinces who provide some sort of financial assistance. So Ontario, Quebec, Manitoba, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island just announced a program in January.
Oh, that's good. Mm-hmm. I don't think a lot of people realize how taxing financially. The emotional part, I think people sort of start to understand that, oh my gosh, this is horrible, whatever emotions you go through. But the financial part is something that, it's not talked about. And I know in Ontario, for sure, they fund one IVF cycle, which is amazing. But that also can mean that if you had that one embryo and you had nothing to freeze, that's your IVF cycle, right? Which was the case for us, the first one. And we felt that like we just wasted, what was it, like $10,000 or either way. And that's just for the IVF itself. But the drugs, and the
time off work.
Yes.
And there's the emotion. It's so complex. The financial barrier to treatment in this country is substantial. So just like you said, there is an emotional piece. And Harvard research shows that when you're diagnosed with infertility, patients have the same grief response as someone who's been diagnosed with cancer, but we don't treat it the same. We don't. Number one, we don't talk about it. That's why it's important for me to share my story, for you to share your story, so that people know that they aren't alone. This is more common. 1 in 6 heterosexual couples in Canada experience some sort of fertility struggle. And then if you're looking at, single people who want to have a family, they exist. This is 2021. Anybody in the LGBTQ community, if they don't have a uterus, they can't carry a baby. So we need to look at surrogate and an egg donor or sperm donor. And how do we have these conversations? And how do you have these conversations with your employer to say, I'm trying to have a baby. I might need some time off, and I don't really know when it's going to be because I have to go to the clinic maybe this day, but it might be tomorrow.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And like, these are conversations that most people, it's challenging to have those conversations.
Yeah.
And then to add on the financial aspect, in Canada, the average cost of an IVF cycle is $20,000.
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
And many people do not have $20,000 sitting in a bank account. Some people can't even access a line of credit or a loan. Some people remortgage homes, borrow from family. If you're lucky enough to have those options, and lots of people don't even have that option.
Mhm.
And that's terrible.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And to think that the barrier between you and having that family, when most of the people around you, are having kids, I'm gonna say for free, right?
Yeah,
You know, it's
absolutely.
just like
Yeah.
Of
it just
course.
happens.
Mhm.
That is devastating,
It is
right?
devastating.
And if you're looking at everybody in your circle has the same financial situation, and you know that if it happened to anybody else, they wouldn't be able to have a family, but you're the only one who is having this issue. Yeah, it's really devastating. And I think you may lose contact with a lot of friends because
Absolutely.
you don't, they're at a different stage where they're with their
Mhm.
kids. You don't want to be around that. Maybe they don't understand what you're going through. So it has so many layers when you're
It
going
does. It
through.
really does. And you'll notice people we did it. I did it. I separated myself from family and friends. I had plans, days of that baby showers were occurring,
Mm-hmm.
when I shut down or unfollowed people on social media just because I couldn't handle the constant, um, you
Baby.
know,
Yes.
baby, back to school photos, kids at
Yes.
Yeah.
Halloween, family time at Christmas,
Yeah.
all of those things
Yeah.
are triggers for people who
And
are
just reminders of, of like that life that you want, right? Or
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. So you do this first IVF cycle. The first one is failed. You guys are devastated.
Mhm.
Talk to me about like what that looks like in your marriage, in your
Oh, it's a
couple,
good question.
you know?
So prior to this, even starting the IVF cycle, and my husband and I we grieved differently. Um, and although it was his issue, I actually didn't recognize that. I was also grieving and was unable to even really think about how he was feeling. I mean, I probably did, but I was so deep in it, I couldn't get to a point where I was understanding of how he was feeling. And when I would be in a puddle on the floor, he would be angry. Or vice versa. When he was crying, I was raging.
Right.
And I remember he came to me and we had several conversations, all brought up by him actually, that said, and we'd only been married for not even a year at that point. If you want to get a divorce, I would understand that. We came into this knowing we were going to have a family, and I can't give that to you. And so I will understand if this is something, if you don't want to continue. And I was like, I couldn't even process that conversation, let
Yeah.
alone,
Yeah.
but that's where he was. And he was trying, I guess, to support me by saying, you need to have a family. I'll deal with this in my own time, or on my own. And you can go on and have a family with someone else. Like, we had that conversation. Of course, I said no. And then that made me angry. Like, how can you,
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
it was just, there was a lot of not awesome stuff happening in our relationship for a really long time,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and I sometimes still feel like, gosh, some of that lingering stuff from your fertility days can kind of hang out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Very well, not early on, but throughout the process of our fertility treatment, we sought therapy because
Mm-hmm.
I remember, I'm not sure if we had gone through IVF already
I
or
don't think so.
yeah, I don't think we had, but like we just couldn't find answers, right? Doctors was like, nothing's wrong, you may
Oh,
have to do IVF 3, 4 times. And I'm like, we don't have IVF money 3, 4 times, right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
we live in Ottawa.
Mhm.
My family's from Whitby, which is in the east end of
Mhm.
Toronto. We had heard of a great doctor in Hamilton, Ontario.
Mhm.
So one weekend we decide we're gonna go and we're gonna drive down there to get her opinion. And I remember on the way, I can't remember if it was the way there or the way back,
It's the way there.
on the way there,
Yeah.
and I'm just trying to tell Leonard, like, did you prepare your questions? Like,
Yeah.
we've been waiting like 8 months for this appointment. He's
Yeah.
like, I'm just gonna wing it. And in my head, I was
That
just
was the
like,
worst thing. Not only did I say that, but I also didn't like. I'm the type when it comes to directions, I just like pop it on my phone. Like if we're halfway close to somewhere,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
like as long as I know the vicinity, I'm like I know to take
Yeah.
that highway. Once we get to near the exit, then I'll pop in the address in my GPS, and then I told that to
Mhm.
Sarah, and she's like, "You don't even know where we're going? We've been waiting for this meeting for like 8 months, and like you're just gonna wing it? You're just gonna do what you
Is this not a priority to you?
exactly." And
Yeah.
like that's what she was really saying. She was saying,
Yeah.
obviously you're not taking this seriously. This is not a priority for you right now. And that day just was definitely one of the worst days that we had.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, we need to go to therapy.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And I wanted to know that he was willing to go. And
Yeah.
he was like, sure. And I was just like, at least you'll go, right? Because
Absolutely.
I didn't know how to communicate with him. I didn't know.
Mhm.
And sometimes he would be like, let's say we had an appointment and we didn't hear what we wanted to hear. He would go off and do something, maybe go to the movies or be on his own. And I'm like, what about me? You're not
Uh-huh.
spending time with me and whatnot. So, and I didn't understand that that's what he needed,
Hmm.
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I needed somebody to talk about it, somebody to just be there, and maybe not even talk, just be there together. So yeah, that definitely has a huge impact on
Huge.
your relationship.
Mhm.
Did you ever seek support or any help for your
So I didn't really understand the importance of it at that time. And looking back, I wish I did. The clinic didn't really set us up for success in that way. And I wish I had done more. Sought sort of solace in groups online. And at one point, we did decide that we needed to find support outside of each other. We needed to find people who had similar experiences, but not that we couldn't support each other, but we needed that external support network. And we both found that, and that was really important in kind of keeping things more sane. But we definitely would have benefited from going to see a reproductive counselor, absolutely, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now we got through all the bad stuff, but at the end of the tunnel, where did you guys kind of like turn that corner where things started to kind of work in your
Look up.
favor?
Yeah, so we did after our failed IVF, fresh IVF. We did a frozen embryo transfer later in the early spring, and I transferred 2 embryos at that time, and I did get pregnant. And then a year almost to the day of me finding out it didn't work, our son was born. So he's 7.5 now. And then we've done subsequent frozen embryo transfers using those embryos that didn't work. So I ended up with a second IVF cycle here in New Brunswick. And my twins are now 2.5.
Okay.
Wow.
Mhm.
So both times you transferred 2.
I transferred 1 several times, but when they weren't working, I transferred. So the first time I transferred 1 single embryo. The second time we transferred 2. And at that point, there was an older, I call it the older way of freezing embryos. It wasn't, so when they thawed, they weren't as stable as the technology now. Under a cryopreservation, frozen embryo transfers are arguably way more, well, not way more, but they're as good, if not better, than a fresh transfer. So I did several single embryo transfers and a couple of double ones. I can't remember the works. And then what happened when we did our IVF cycle here in New Brunswick, I did a freeze-all cycle. I did not do a fresh transfer. And because I'd had several failed cycles with 2 embryos, I had requested for 2 embryos to be transferred, which is not policy. But given that history, the doctor did allow it. And I did end up getting pregnant with twins.
With twins.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's amazing. I know at a certain, I'm not sure how old you were at the time. How old were you at the time, if you don't mind me asking?
I think I was 36, 37.
Okay. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that at a certain age they'll like strongly not recommend it, right?
Mhm.
They'll just
Absolutely.
and I think
Under 37 or 38 is the cutoff.
yeah, and I
Mhm.
think 36 would have been one of those ages, at least for my doctor, that I don't think he would have, or he or she would have allowed it.
Yeah,
Taking the
absolutely.
chances, right? Like
Yeah, well, and with two embryos, the pregnancy rate really doesn't change.
mhm.
Okay.
So the science doesn't support two. If you transfer two and you don't get pregnant, the chances of you getting pregnant with one is the same.
Mhm.
Okay.
So, but it's a high risk pregnancy. And the goal is to have a healthy singleton baby at the end of the pregnancy. And I can tell you, it is a challenge. It's challenging. I had a healthy pregnancy. I was very fortunate. But it puts the mother at high risk. It puts the babies at really high risk for lots of different things, including preterm death,
Yeah.
and then there are challenges with twins after, of course.
Right.
So,
Were there any complications for you?
no, I had none, and I was able to carry to term. So I was over 37 weeks when I delivered them. So I was really fortunate. But again, I didn't have any reproductive health issues. So I truly believe that was part of my ability to have a healthy pregnancy.
Right.
Complications.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I'm realizing now, so Lennon and I, we went through 2 IVFs. The second one, it worked.
Mhm.
The first one, we only had one embryo, a fresh transfer. The second one that was going to get frozen didn't make it at the time. So it was good at 10 a.m., but it wasn't good at 3 p.m. So either way.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's definitely devastating. But with the second IVF, we did a frozen transfer. We did freeze all cycle, and we got pregnant with the transfer after COVID, which COVID is like a whole different ball game. So one thing that I'm realizing now, I'm currently 34 weeks pregnant.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations, you guys. That's amazing.
Thank you. I find that pregnancy after fertility issues is not the same as everybody else talks about. Did you experience that, or is there anything that you had experienced when you were pregnant that you felt were still different than your peers?
That's a great question. And I see a lot in our support groups, patients talking about, okay, now I'm pregnant, and they can't enjoy the pregnancy. You're always like, what if? You're waiting, you get pregnant and you're waiting to the 12 weeks or the 8-week scan. Like, is this a viable pregnancy? You're constantly on guard.
Yes.
It's so common. So I felt definitely, especially with my first, I definitely was more on sort of high alert. And I did get to a point where I thought, okay, I'm all good. But you're right. And it's so common, especially for patients who have had recurrent loss, and unable to sort of carry that pregnancy to term. That is traumatic. And it's something that absolutely stays with you, no matter how many subsequent pregnancies and healthy babies you deliver. That will sort of seems to stick around.
That's I think that's one thing that you only realize once you get pregnant, right?
Absolutely.
It's different.
You get to that. The goal is just to get pregnant, and then you get there and you think, oh God, I have to keep this. And then there's this sort of underlying anxiety of I have to do everything in my power to make sure that I don't lose this, because it could have been your only embryo and this might be your only chance, and it's really scary.
Because I know Sarah probably hasn't really shared this with me, but I know she puts a lot of pressure on herself to make sure that everything that she does, correctly, whether it's diet, her exercise, the
Yeah.
prenatal vitamins and medication that she has to take. Like she's been a trooper and she's been on it. But I know like deep down it's a pressure that she
Oh,
that
definitely.
on herself to, okay, like now we're pregnant, now we got to sustain this till we reach the end of the line, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. There are two things that I want to touch base on. So the first thing, when you told us that you found out that you had fertility issues, you told me that the doctor told you that you were never going to have a family.
Hmm.
And obviously that's not true,
Yeah,
right?
Right.
yeah.
And I don't even know how to phrase this question, but if you could go back to this doctor,
Oh,
what would you say to not be like, well, show him, but like what kind of different approach that you feel like he or she could have taken?
To at least
yeah.
some type of hope.
It was so it was really traumatic, and I left the appointment. This was a doctor. I don't know. I can't remember if he was a military member or not, but either way, he worked on the military base my husband was working on. And he turned around and said, "Yeah, your sperm count's really low. You're never going to have a family." And then he turned around, and I'm going to say something really crass here. Is that okay, or is that not okay?
Yeah, that is absolutely okay.
Yeah.
He said, turned around, looked me in the eyes, and said, "I'm going to feel your husband's balls right now. Do you want to stay?"
Mm.
That's what he said to me. And when I look back, I was wild.
Yeah.
Like, who says that?
Yeah.
Zero compassion, zero, like, you just told me, and we knew nothing. I mean, it was a shock. We literally this was brand new news. 60 seconds in my ears. And that's what you said. I left, and I could tell, like, even the secretary outside, I slammed the door. It was really a very traumatic experience. Looking back, he obviously didn't realize how big a deal this was and how many months it had been to this point.
Yes.
For us, and challenging on the relationship and all that stuff. But, I feel like there are some doctors who actually just don't know, family physicians potentially, who don't necessarily deal with this, and they don't all the time, or they don't have the resources, or don't have the words, or don't know what to say, or even sort of what the next steps are.
Yeah.
And so I was lucky because I did have a colleague who worked in the fertility sphere. So I was able to say, okay, now what? Because that direction wasn't given from this physician.
No direction was given whatsoever.
Yeah. And that is so common. And that's really hard, because then what happens is, again, that's adding time and time and time and time to your journey.
Exactly.
And that's why Fertility Matters is here to work with fertility experts across the country to get this information to patients so they know what to do next, to advocate for themselves, to have the information, to have the conversations that aren't easy. But at least when you have the information, you can do something with that information.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like one thing, before Sarah gets to her second question, one thing that you brought up that's at least for me was so profound was the fact that when you go to these meetings, these appointments, there's this whole history behind that initial consultation, right? And all that pain, all the disappointment, all the stress, all the anxiety comes to that one meeting. So then to get something so devastating where the person tells you is like very either non-sympathetic and not sensitive to your emotions, like it's devastating.
Yeah.
It's an attack on your spirit, and I don't think people understand that, because you bring all this baggage to you into this first appointment, and you're so hopeful, wanting to have answers.
Exactly.
And then you're looking to this person for at least some type of direction, and then they don't give it to you, and
they're like crush your spirit,
crushing your spirit.
Absolutely. I would completely agree with you there. And I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
And it's why you sharing your story and talking about it and doing this podcast and making sure people are connected to the realities of this, that these conversations continue so that we can actually because the reality is there's a whole other, every day there's someone new who's being diagnosed. There are thousands of people who are diagnosed with some sort of fertility challenge every single day. This is never going to go away. In fact, the fertility rates, the infertility rates are going to continue to grow as people put off having families and environmental changes and careers and those types of things continue to. It's just not going away.
Right. Yeah. You're absolutely right. It's definitely going to increase. So, which is one of the reasons why I think what you're doing with Fertility Matters is you need it, right?
It's so important.
It's so important.
Absolutely.
So I just want you to just explain to us a little bit more. So if somebody goes on the fertilitymatters.ca website, what kind of direction can they find in terms of support? I know a lot of people at some point they look for adoption, maybe. I know I was looking for information about adoption and I didn't even know where to start. So just talk to us a little bit about like what can they find on that website?
Sure. So number one, support groups. So that community that is so important to connect with peers who are experiencing sort of a similar journey to you, because it's not the same. You don't talk to your family or friends. You've likely separated yourself from some of your social groups because you can't connect, or you feel, being around their kids makes you feel worse. So those online support groups and or support groups meetings. So we have virtual meetings depending on what area of the country you live in. If you have information, if you have a fertility struggle, if this is not happening for you and you end up being diagnosed as infertile, and we've tried to move away from the term infertility, to be honest. It's kind of got a negative tone. So you'll notice this change to the use of the word fertility. But I've lost my train of thought. Sorry, you guys.
We were talking about support groups, Fertility Matters.
Oh, yeah. So it doesn't always mean you're going to have to do IVF.
Okay.
Once you have your initial appointment with a fertility specialist who can really tell you what's going on, hopefully, and even if you fall into that unexplained category, it doesn't mean that you have to go and pay $20,000 for IVF. That is not everybody's journey. However, IVF may not be an option for you for whatever reason. And there are options like surrogacy. So for someone, if you're a person or a couple and one of those people has a uterus and you can't carry a pregnancy, people can get the services of a surrogate who can carry that pregnancy for you. There's access to egg, sperm, and embryo donors. If you have a zero sperm count and need to use a donor, that's okay. And we try to normalize those conversations and help you get to the resources that exist to continue this family journey. So we're here to support that. Adoption, the lawyers that can be involved with a surrogacy journey. We try to connect the pieces as this sort of resource for patients so that you can get directly to the expert to get the information, to make these informed decisions. And so it doesn't feel so scary.
Yeah. Wow. Well, honestly, I think that's amazing. I wish I knew about Fertility Matters. Yeah. I was going through this journey. So I'm
so glad we're connected now.
Yeah. So I'm hopeful that, through this conversation, somebody will be, or multiple people will be able to find some answers, or at least guide them towards the answers that they need to continue.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for continuing the conversation. Thank you for being so vulnerable and open. It's not easy, and lots of times, Leonard, it's the women that are doing the talking. So thank you for adding your voice to the conversation. Men are part of this equation, and they need the support too. So thank you for that.
That's awesome. If somebody wants to reach you personally, either on Facebook and Instagram, how can they do so?
So you can either direct message through either of our social media channels, or send me a message to info@fertilitymatters.ca. And it will be me or Darlene, who's my administrative assistant, who will get back to you.
Okay. And that's through email, correct?
Sorry, yeah, email. Yeah, and
Okay.
then if you're on Facebook, just in the search bar Fertility Matters Canada, and on Instagram at fertility_Canada.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that. This was a great conversation. I'm sure we could talk about this for a lot longer.
Yeah.
We definitely can.
Yeah, so we'll end it there for today. Our viewers, you heard it right here. We'll put the Instagram and Facebook tags and all the information on how they can reach you or go to fertilitymatters.ca so that if they need a resource, they can find it.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you both so much.
This episode.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's great.
Yeah. So to your viewers, you heard it right here first. Reach out to Carolynn if you want to. And until next time, don't forget to live your truth.